Welcome back, everybody. This is Aaron, and you're listening to the Oxrageous podcast. It's been a long time since I've been able to do a podcast after a win, so I'm a little more upbeat this week. Plus, it's time yet again for our annual butt-kicking of Kentucky. Glad you all could join me. So, y'all remember the Space Shuttle Challenger explosion? You know, what a terrible day that was. Everybody remembers where they were. I was in the 4th grade, and I remember that happening. It also seems like a long, long time ago, because it was. The reason I bring it up is because that was in 1986, which was the last year Kentucky beat the Florida Gators. In fact, it is the longest consecutive win streak of one opponent over another in college football right now. And there's definitely been some close calls over the years with those guys. I remember in the 90s, we had that one that came down to the last play. Doring's got a touchdown. And even as recently as 2007, we had Andre Woodson throwing all over our young secondary. Remember that? Freshman Joe Hayden out there getting burned right and left. But the point is, it's never enough. They can never get over the top. And, of course, even last year in our worst season in forever, they still couldn't make a game of it. And that was even in their house. So there's just not a lot of people worried this week about Kentucky. You just don't worry about them. I'm guessing the streak has to end someday, but it won't be this Saturday. Every single year you see the same old articles from the Kentucky newspapers talking about it's a new attitude this year. It's a new attitude, we're finally going to beat Florida. I swear they just take the same article and repost it every year. In fact, now that I think about it, I remember doing this podcast last year before the Kentucky game and ripping into the Gainesville Sun's Robbie Andrew for picking against Florida. And thinking a hometown newspaper guy picks against the Gators at Kentucky? Now, that was early in the season, and maybe Robbie saw something that the rest of us didn't at that time. But until that streak ends, I don't know how anyone could pick Kentucky to win this game. They're coming off a pretty ho-hum 20-3 victory over Ohio. And they got some nice fancy gray new uniforms. And still, it's just Kentucky. I mean, this is not basketball. This is Kentucky football. And as a Gator fan, you just can't take them seriously. I mean, I can't. Can you? 27 years in a row. I mean, that's amazing. But I can tell you, I'm glad we're playing Kentucky this week. Since the first game of the year got canceled, we need some more warm-up time before the big hitters. And we've got Bama looking us in the face, which is a game that's so big for the program, it's hard to put into words right now, but we'll get to that next week. Kentucky really is a perfect warm-up game. They're an SEC team, and as lousy as they are, they're about 50 times better than Eastern Michigan. I was reading some people speculating that Eastern Michigan was the worst team the Gators had played in years. I mean, I think Georgia Southern would take Eastern Michigan behind the woodshed. At any rate, our Gators did what they needed to do. So, Kentucky's going to give us a bigger challenge than Eastern Michigan. I think that's fair to say. Because the opponent was so weak, there's still some question marks. And there's still been a lot of question marks about Jeff Driscoll, who put up some pretty good numbers, but still has some issues that he's going to have to work through to win some people over. I know one complaint that a lot of people have about Jeff Driscoll is that he never hits his receiver in stride. With the long balls, they either have to wait for it or he overthrows them. He's never been that accurate of a quarterback. Most of the talk I've seen this week has been about Treon Harris, who threw 2 passes and has people on cloud 9 about him. And this after a whole summer of hype about Will Grier. We barely discussed Treon Harris for 6 months. So I just find it a little amusing. Treon Harris comes in, 2 passes, Will Grier forgotten. Now granted, they were great passes, but we definitely need to see a lot more. And I know I, for one, am happy that we've got some talent in the backup quarterback position, so that if Driscoll gets hurt or struggles, we have other quarterbacks that can play. And it was nice to have a backup quarterback come in a blowout and throw some passes, even if it was just 2 passes. The last 3 years, Will Muschamp would not have done that. It was obvious it was Roper's show on Saturday. Will it stay Roper's show? The eternal question. We're going to find out. But it's great to have some new material, and it's great to have some stuff to talk about. I think the Gators threw something like 20 passes on first down on Saturday. And that alone, to me, is exciting. I mean, that's a change. To suddenly have the defense have to guess what we're doing. It's great to get back there again. And back to Driscoll, it was obvious the coaching staff told him not to run the ball. He'd run 3 or 4 yards and then slide. He's a great athlete, and we need to allow him to run the football. It's a big part of his game. So I really hope the coaches aren't trying to turn him into a pocket quarterback, and that was just a one-game thing. Losing Jake McGee was big. It's a shame we couldn't get through one game without a major injury because it looked like McGee was going to be a pretty good weapon this year for us. But one thing I can say about Clay Burton is it appears he has better hands now, which is good because we're definitely going to need them. And how about Andre DeBose, huh? First off, he still remains a tremendous kick returner. And I was blown away by his effort when he dove into the back of the end zone, right into the bushes. That's a motivated guy. That's a guy I don't think we would have seen 3 years ago. So it was just one game, but there was a lot to be encouraged about. And it's nice to get the SEC schedule rolling. Normally we get to beat up on Tennessee first, but this time we're going to go straight to Kentucky. And we'll get to beat up on Tennessee later. Starting next week, we get into the meat of the schedule, including that aforementioned trip to Alabama, which is going to be absolutely huge. And I'm going to start interviewing some guests again for this podcast. Things are still moving along extremely briskly at GatorChatter.com. It certainly appears that everybody's been telling their friends because we have a lot of new people, and we had a great time on the board during the opening game. We have our usual game thread, and we have a live chat box for some great instantaneous interaction with your fellow Gators. Also got a weekly score contest, which has weekly prizes. I'm going to have end-of-the-year prizes. Be sure to check that out. It's a sticky on the main page. Doesn't cost you anything to play, so you've got no excuses. So, as usual, if you have any questions, comments, or would like to appear as a guest on the podcast, you can shoot me an email at oxrageous@oxrageous.com. There's definitely a change in the air right now. It's just amazing what winning will do. Fans can forget things in a hurry when you start winning. Everybody have a great week, and go Gators.